Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
All right, Joe, it is the middle part of December, and that, of course, means the college football calendar is flying. There might not be a whole lot of games outside of the annual Army-Navy game going on, but the Sun Devils are going bowling. The anticipation or perhaps existential dread of the transfer portal is looming. And, of course, we just coming off a very active and perhaps successful Sun Devil signing day.
Yeah, man, I missed 1 week due to illness, and a lot of stuff is building up. There are a lot of storylines to go over. It has been an eventful just few days. The last week or so. It's been eventful. Some good, some bad. Season's not over, as you talked about. ASU going bowling, a really tough matchup. Going to be going down in El Paso there. So we'll break that all down. Nothing slowing down here. So there's a lot for us to sort out.
All right, so we will, of course, be diving into all that stuff. We'll also be talking to a couple of current and future Sun Devils. We'll be talking to defensive tackle Jacob Kongaika and wide receiver Malik McClain as they now approach their final game at the college level. We'll also be talking to a new Sun Devil, defensive back Jalen Williams, get his thoughts on becoming a Sun Devil, why he wanted to spend his college career in Tempe. But let's get into the big news, as ASU's season is going to continue one more game, and it's a familiar game. It's a rematch of the 2014 Sun Bowl as ASU heads down to El Paso for the 8th time in program history to face ACC champion, weirdly enough, Duke.
Yeah, that is something else. So I looked before we started recording. So ASU is now into a tie with UTEP, obviously the host of the Sun Bowl, for second behind Texas Tech for the most all-time appearances. And there have been several of them, not just historically. Some date back nearly 100 years ago. We've seen a lot, as you mentioned, 2014, 17, 19. This is the 4th time in just a little bit over a decade ASU will make that postseason trip to El Paso. Really interesting matchup. As you mentioned, it's a ACC champion team, obviously a team that was not included in the college football playoff because of the body of work, from their entire season. But man, they are entering this bowl game with some major momentum. Are the Blue Devils, and ASU obviously not so much. So it doesn't get much easier for ASU after challenging into the regular season, to say the least. What they've got headed up against them in El Paso, assuming everybody plays. Now, that's the kind of thing that, you got to keep an eye out when it gets to bowl season, is are there going to be key players that are draft eligible that choose not to play from either team? So, we'll give a full breakdown as that game gets closer, but it's an intriguing matchup, a challenging one. Certainly not an easy day at the office for ASU, but if they can find a way to scrap together a victory, that would be a high note to end this 2025 season on in the 2025 calendar year, because that game will be ending in the afternoon of New Year's Eve.
Yeah, New Year's Eve in El Paso, a Sun Devil tradition unlike any other. Yeah, that would be the 20th win over the last 2 years. But yeah, as you mentioned, just the bowl system these days, you got to put all kinds of asterisks, and you outside the playoff, you really it would be hard pressed and ill advised to put any kind of substantial meaning in terms of the results of the game. But of course, it's another chance, and perhaps the most valuable aspect of this is the 15 extra practices that each bowl participant is afforded. ASU began their bowl preparations earlier today as we record this on Tuesday evening, and a lot is to be expected in these first couple weeks of bowl practices. The younger guys got a lot of work, and of course, the next generation of Sun Devils, a Sun Devil team that we've talked about, it's going to look a lot different heading into next year. So we're starting to see some of those younger guys get more of a chance. Then we'll see exactly how that translates on game day against Duke, but it's going to be a tough one. Of course, Darian Mensah is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And so we have a few weeks to get to know them a little bit and dive into a full proper game preview. Joe, since our last episode, the all Big 12 conference recognition and awards were released. And so I don't remember this last year. Did they go a third team last year?
I was looking at the list, and I don't think that they did. It just doesn't strike me as that they did. Now, I know that like at some positions they went several deep last year, but that does seem new. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I don't particularly hate it when you have a conference of this size, back in the old like Pac-10 days, something like that. That'd be a little excessive, but not a bad thing to get some guys some recognition.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Devils that did take home three guys each on the first, second, and third teams, as well as some three that were honorable mentions. Starting with the first team, three that you really could easily have predicted: Keith Abney, the corner, wide receiver Jordan Tyson, and running back Raleek Brown. Of course, even with missing a bunch of time due to injury, Jordan Tyson's greatness, too much to pass up. But yeah, Abney, Tyson, Brown were just three of those core pillars of the Sun Devil team all season long.
Yeah, for starting with Abney, no surprise there. Gone on record just how impressed I've been with him all season long. This is as good of a season out of Sun Devil cornerback as I've ever seen. So that's highly warranted. He's certainly someone that you'd pretty much anticipate is going to declare for the NFL draft, getting some first round grades by some mock drafts. Jordan Tyson, the performance was there. It's good that the Big 12 and the voters kind of recognize that he is really the best receiver in the conference. So even that he missed some time, that wasn't held against him. So that's a good thing to see there. And Raleek Brown, just a great story for this season. Obviously he missed the majority of last year. Was frustrated with his role at USC before he came to ASU. So for him to be able to break out with 1,000+ yard season, being an all-purpose guy, and a monster game he had at Colorado and some other big games as well. That's a great story for him. You love to see these cases where the transfers, and Jordan Tyson falls in this category as well, that having transferred from Colorado, but to see these transfers and have them materialize and improve. And Raleek Brown was that 5-star guy coming out of high school, so to be a first-team all-conference competitor at this point in his career after really kind of earned his stripes, took his lumps, had to be patient. It's a great thing to see for him and all of them.
Yeah, three very deserving guys, three guys that could very well be playing on Sundays next season. We will, two of them for sure, and we'll see about what Raleek's future holds. But moving on to the second team, this is one where I feel like we're going to have my first really kind of like strong feeling of that one of these guys was snubbed. Let's start off with offensive lineman Maxi Hanachor earned some second team recognition, and then ASU's dynamic pair of linebackers Jordan Crook and Keyshawn Elliott. The fact that one, Keyshawn Elliott, or if not both, weren't on the first team is something I think was kind of outrageous. Now, there's a lot of good linebackers in this conference, that is for sure, and that kind of always leads to if some guy gets snubbed, who you taking off? I don't really necessarily want to get into that. I just want to have my cake and eat it too. But man, how Keyshawn Elliott's not a first teamer this season, that's robbery.
Yeah, both of them, and I mean they were just so outstanding this season. And one game one would be a star, the other would be. I mean, it's just a dynamic pair. So it's tough. Maybe the voters had a difficult time separating them and saying who of the two should get the nod. So maybe we'll put them on the second team. But to your point, I mean, I think they both could have been first team all conference recipients there. And for Hanachor, I mean, that's a positive thing there. That's a guy, again, you talk about the growth and the development and the patience, referring to Raleek Brown in the previous conversation. I mean, you could say that several times fold about Hanachor and just his background and how he developed at ASU, not just becoming a starter, but an all conference caliber player. ASU's offensive line took its lumps, had its injuries. So it's good to see one of the linemen get this sort of consideration.
All right, moving on to the third team, and three defenders make up this group of Sun Devil selections. Two on the defensive line, Justin Watley, who put together a scorching second half of the season, just a sack or two at least each and every week. Prince Dorba, and then safety Ghost Rouser.
Yeah, no, those great to see Watley get that recognition. He's someone that again coming in this season, kind of a utility man with that entrenched starting pair between Dorba and Clayton Smith. Dorba, I'd say, slightly a bit of a surprise, just some streaky play there, but that's good to get that recognition. And Ghost Rouser, someone that, had a solid season as well. So good to see. Gosh, you get about half the defense, all things considered, some measure of all conference recognition between the first, second, and third teams.
Yeah, and so closing things out with three honorable mention selections. This is a guy who was a second team selection a year ago, tight end Shimon Mateer, who I think his receiving numbers perhaps took a little bit of a hit out of necessity. He is an excellent blocker, and the team definitely needed his skills there in the trenches. Some of the struggles along the offensive line. Kicker Jesus Gomez, an honorable mention selection, and this was one kind of a bit of an eyebrow raise, but I think in a good way. Wide receiver Derek Eusebio is getting some all-conference recognition.
Yeah, no, that one was when I saw that on the list, I was like, wow, that's impressive. Not going to take away from him. It's great that he's getting that sort of recognition there. Gomez was one that, there were some good kickers in the conference, and he was one that I thought, at least at various points of the season, could have been your first team kicker, especially in the early going. You get that Baylor game, things like that. Mateer, there are a couple of these players that you could have slid them into a second or third team. Mateer still had a very, very solid season. There are some names that are absent there. I'm not sure if that's kind of what we'll dive into next, but man, you see like CJ Fight nowhere to be found there, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the snubs, and I think Fight's right there. Unfortunately, I think he plays that critical role that is like so valuable for the actual tangible. Are you a good defense of just kind of that space eater guy who constantly is facing double teams? But I think that his success is kind of reflected in the honors for the linebackers and Crook and Elliott in terms of just a guy who frees things up with his ability to clog up the trenches and open up those lanes for linebackers. Joe, who else do you feel is maybe worthy of some of that all conference recognition?
Well, I'm in the near future. I'm not sure too many Sun Devil fans will, shed tears about this, but you could give an argument for like Sam Leavitt as maybe like an honorable mention selection there too. Not necessarily a snub, but with Prince Dorby getting third team there, felt like Clayton Smith and he were kind of on equal levels for a majority of the season. So that name being absent is one. I'm not going to say it surprises me, but that's just one that kind of jumps at the top of my head as well. Someone like Ben Coleman just hurt too early in the season, I think, to really get too much recognition there. So all things considered, I mean, those are really the ones that stand out to me. That would be possibilities in any realm there. I'm just kind of going through the ledger in my head, and those are the main ones that I would say would probably stand out.
Yeah, I'd say maybe Boogie Wilson. He battled some injuries, but I thought filling in for Xavier Alford, that's a huge set of shoes and cleats to fill there, and I thought he did a very admirable job in kind of setting the stage for his much larger role and I think prominent role in 2026. But yeah, I think overall, outside of the linebackers snubbed a little bit, I think they did a pretty good job because of course this was an up and down season. And, one of the interesting things just kind of, I think speaks to the unpredictability of this conference is the first team quarterback was Noah Fafita. And I think if we go back to August, would he have been in the top 8 in terms of just, the quarterbacks you name coming off that 2023 season? And I think that speaks to how well he performed this year, but also some of that inconsistencies. We have Sam Leavitt, who was the preseason offensive player of the year. And then, the Josh Hoover, Sawyer Robertsons, of the world. Jalen Daniels coming back, Devin Dampier putting together a great season. I just think this kind of speaks to the unpredictability and the fun nature of this Big 12 conference.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and last season was kind of the year of the running back in the Big 12, and then this season, 2025, as we were talking about, that was going to be the year of the quarterback. You look at all those preseason lists and how many of the Big 12 quarterbacks occupied like top 10, top 20 lists by these magazines and websites and things like that. So that really got shuffled up a lot. And obviously ASU was one of a few victims of how that things got shuffled up at quarterback. So for that to happen, yeah, just another sign of this being just a really, really weird conference. And, though it certainly didn't happen to the fullest degree, I remember saying a lot last season about how the University of Arizona from 2023 to 24 was a cautionary tale about how things can go up and then down in a hurry. ASU didn't go up and down as significantly as they did in those 2 years, but obviously the last year of time has proven to us that nothing is truly predictable in this conference and in college sports.
All right, so let's turn our attention to recruiting. Of course, National Signing Day was last week. The early signing period ran from Wednesday through Friday, and again, tip of the cap to Ralph Amson filling in admirably to break down the group of Sun Devil commitments. Now, we did record that on Tuesday, as we said a couple times during the episode, and for the most part, ASU's group of commits turned into Sun Devil signees. Now, there is a couple of notes to pass along, and since that happened, because of course there is some times, and nothing in college football is ever static. So, wide receiver Cooper Reed, who we talked pretty highly about, the lone wide receiver commit in ASU's 2026 class. Well, the folks in Fort Worth at TCU, they must have made a very compelling late run and late pitch, as he was a surprise decommit and flip to the Horned Frogs on signing day.
Yeah, that was, a bit of a surprise because he had been committed for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
So these things tend to happen, and they happen at the 11th hour. And recruiting's wild. Like, it's just all kind of a common theme right now. Again, the things that you think might be predictable or reliable, not always the case.
All right, but ASU, of course, one Texan lost, made gains and brought another Texan into the fold as they were able to sign safety Davis Kinney, a three-star prospect, 6-footer, 185-pound defensive back prospect, a former Northwestern commit, but now he's going to be joining a pretty nice group of Sun Devil defensive backs.
Yeah, and you know, of course, you got to start to reload because you're getting some departures there. Not necessarily assuming that the true freshmen are going to be entering into that mix, but you know, there are going to be openings, there are going to be options. So it's good to kind of refortify that group. He's one of, I believe, 2 safeties in the signing class so far. Now, you know, we'll see how these players factor into the immediate plans, but good to load up at the position.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is one other prospect. Yeah, ASU was chasing some others that ultimately decided to sign elsewhere, but I believe there's one blue chip prospect that ASU is still in the mix for, still in pretty good shape, although he did not sign during the early signing period. 4-star defensive lineman Anthony Jones. He was a decommitment from the UCLA. Kind of had an on again, off again relationship with the Bruins there a little bit, but it seems like ASU is in good shape there. But of course, with that early signing period closed, we'll see how things progress over the next couple months to the traditional signing period in February.
Yeah, they'll keep adding on where they can. Obviously, the transfer portal is going to be a very significant thing. So the player acquisition, we'll dive into it in the future, I'm sure, because ASU does have its work cut out for it with such a senior heavy group in 2025.
Yeah, the college football calendar obviously needs such an overhaul, but it is now interesting with just the single transfer portal window running through the front half of January. You wonder now, how that's going to impact some of those February signees. Maybe some schools have some luck in the transfer portal in January. All of a sudden, some spots aren't necessarily available there in the future. So we'll see how that pans out because nothing again or everything always seems to be in flux. So Ralph and I last week broke down the class and had gave our takes in terms of some of the strengths and some of the future stars. But Joe, of course, now that you're back off the injured list, let's get to your take. When you look at this group of Sun Devil signees, at least you say so far, what kind of jumps out to you is some of the strengths and also maybe perhaps on the flip side, some areas that you thought that they could have done a better job addressing?
So it's interesting to think about, high school recruiting now. Obviously, we've said this numerous times, how it is just so remarkably different now than it was, 5 years ago, let alone 10, 15, 20 years ago. I almost liken it to like the MLB draft, to where it's like some of these guys might be your main players in the future. Some of them might be, trade fodder or, transfer fodder. It's seems like more of an investment for the future in depth. I mean, if you really think about it from ASU's perspective, I mean, how many starters came to ASU out of the high school ranks? Talk about CJ Fight, Keith Abney, Tyson Brown if he were healthy, but it's just a limited list. So
Yeah.
you just kind of look at this and you think, okay, is this the true future of the program, or are these maybe some pieces that will come into play? It's just a different thing. So just the concept in general, you feel like it's a longer term sort of thing, or more of a wait and see approach, because ASU has had a few occasions in recent years under Kenny Dillingham where some of the top signees out of high school transferred after a year. So as far as the things that stand out to me in a positive level, number one, I mean, you got to start at the top and getting Jake Fetty and keeping him committed, getting him signed, not having anything depart. I mean, that would have been a pretty crushing blow. By pretty much all accounts, he's essentially like the second highest rated quarterback to sign with the Big 12 team as far as a guy that's going to make it to campus. Not necessarily talking about, the Ryder Lyons who's, committed to BYU. There's that quarterback that's going to Houston that, it's pretty much the top in the conference. But, Fetty is right up there with the best of the best as far as quarterbacks who signed with Big 12 teams. And that's a big time thing in general, obviously compounded with the news that we'll dive into as far as ASU's future, the quarterback position. For ASU to be able to get Jermaine Mitchell, the number one JUCO prospect in the country, an offensive tackle to decommit from Georgia. I mean, those are all some major superlatives right there that are very, very important there. So some of the top end things, and getting 4-star prospects on offense like Hayden Vercher at tight end, like Carde Mackett at running back. You get some edge players both from the JUCO and high school ranks that hopefully can fortify that defensive line, because, you're losing from the defensive end, the edge position. I mean, you're losing Clayton Smith, Prince Dorbah, Justin Watley, Elijah O'Neal. You're losing your 2 deep, so you got to refortify that. So, beyond that, there will be probably more kind of the diamond in the rough type of players, things like that. But I am encouraged by that top end, aspect of things. I would say the wide receiver position, as we talked about, there was a decommitment. That's just been such a curious situation with high school recruiting because, I mean, you look back, you had Nayland Scott decommitted. That happened months ago, but that happened. 4-star player. Last year, Adrian Wilson, 4-star recruit, decommitted. Signed to Colorado, transferred to North Carolina. So just not being able to bring in, at least at this point, a high-profile wide receiver is something that, a little concerning. Obviously, you don't put a ton of weight on these things because you let the transfer portal shake things out and see how that is. But I would say just the top concern, and next year is really going to be the year to figure this out, is ASU is still doing absolutely nothing in terms of local recruiting. There isn't, as far as rivals and on 3, ASU didn't even sign one of the top 20 players in the state. Arizona got a few. ASU did not. And there are some good players out there. Now, the 2027 class is pretty loaded. We know about the golden ticket, thing and all that. So that's going to be the line in the sand, is they need to make some headway in 2027 because that's just wasn't a factor here. And so you're just kind of waiting for that to happen. That's part of what this staff was supposed to excel in, given the incredible high school connections by multiple coaches on this staff. And it just simply is not materialized. So that's a little bit concerning. Again, I think next year is going to be that true line in the sand to see if this staff just has what it takes to be able to keep kids at home. So that's going to be a big proving ground, but that is something that has a measure of concern to me.
All right. So before we talk to one of the newest Sun Devils, defensive back Jalen Williams, Joe, who's a guy or two that maybe, obviously ASU has brought in 5 at this point, blue chip guys, but maybe who's a little bit under the radar when, every class seems to have a diamond in the rough or two that maybe he's not going to be an instant impact guy, but a couple of years down the road is going to be a key contributor.
I'm going to go, let's take a look here. Let's see. I'll see Zestius from Liberty. He was at Saguaro before. He's one of those 2 local guys that ASU got. He's played for some state championship caliber teams and some very good teams there. He's someone that, seems like a bit of a jack of all trades, someone that can come in and possibly contribute. He's been committed for quite a while. I'm going to put his name up there, even if I'm mispronouncing it. I apologize, because you want to see a local guy do good. And, oh, by the way, I just moved out to the West Valley a couple weeks ago. I'm not too far from Liberty High School, so that's kind of like the local school now where I'm located. So I'll go for that one right there. As far as, in addition to that, let's see.
I'll throw out a linebacker on that defensive side. I think Mason Martin's got one of those
profiles. He kind of just seems like one of those just dogs, like one of those just guys that's going to get in there, not afraid of contact, not afraid to get himself dirty. That was actually going to be one that I was going to think about as well.
Yeah. I don't want to necessarily draw like some Caleb McCullough, some like parallels there in terms of just a guy who I think I remember like during our whatever signing class that was forever ago, just like we were looking at, we're talking about him and he had like a 200 tackle type of season. Martin didn't quite get to 200, but he came close and like just shattered his school's tackle record. One of those guys that just is a bigger linebacker, 6'3". He just is always around the ball if you watch the film. And I think it's one of those things where you get him working with Coach Cooper for a couple of years. That could be that generation after Martell Hughes that all of a sudden Mason Martin is one of those starters in this defense putting up 110 tackles a season.
Yeah, and that's though ASU loses some top end talent and transfer portal as well from linebacker, they're still going to bring back some talented players. I think like Martell Hughes, I think is going to be headed for just an absolute breakout season next year if I had to pick that way ahead of time. But they like to use a lot of players. They like to go deep at the linebacker position, even though they don't, traditionally play a lot on the field at the same time. So possibilities out there for him to earn action right away, kind of like Hughes did last year.
All right, so that's another look at the latest look at ASU's 2026 signing class. So it's a good time to talk to one of the new Devils. Here's my conversation with defensive back Jalen Williams. All right, Jalen, thanks for taking some time on National Signing Day. First and foremost, how does it feel to be officially a Sun Devil?
No, honestly, it feels great, man. Blessed to be honest. Just it feels surreal to be honest. It's been a long journey. Just grateful to I find a place to call home.
Now you've been committed to this program for a good long while now, several months, or starting in this spring. How has your relationship with this coaching staff, with the school, with the program overall, kind of evolved and strengthened over those last several months?
No, honestly, just spending time out there, spending time with the coaches. Just growing that bond, growing that connection. It's been good. Just keeping in touch. Just building on that relationship that started in January or stuff. Yeah.
Ultimately, why was Arizona State the right place for you? All what were all the things that made it your next chapter?
Honestly, just you know part of it was the coaches, and the people in that place. They're genuine. They're the most genuine. I feel like and as a player, as a person, I feel like that was very important to me. I wanted people I can trust. People I can count on, and not just the football aspect, but also outside of football as well.
So, of course, you are from Georgia, and making your way out here to Tempe to during the recruiting process and during the official visit to obviously see the facilities and the program up close, meet these people face to face. When you're out here in Tempe during that process, what were some of the things that made the biggest impressions on you?
Honestly, just seeing the connection between everybody, seeing how everybody interacts with each other, how the players interact with the coaches, how the coaches interact with each other, and how the players interact with each other. I just, it really caught my eye because, I take that kind of stuff, very important to me.
And of course, Kenny Dillingham's going to be your future head coach. Still one of the youngest coaches in the entire country, despite being pretty accomplished in his young career. What are some of the things that jump out to you most about Coach Dillingham, and what do you think makes him a successful coach?
Honestly, I feel like his love for his players and the team, I mean, everybody can see, he's about his players. So he take care of his player, as a head coach. That's great. And he's young, so he also has an edge right there because being a younger coach, he connects better with the players.
One of the things that he likes to say about the program is to have more fun while working harder than anybody in the country. What are your thoughts on having a program that is able to obviously focus on the work and the results on the field, but also having a good time while doing so?
I also feel like that's something that's a I'm sorry, that's something that not a lot of people are used to. It's new to this kind of in the CFB in the college. It's new. It's kind of different, but it also works because having the players, they taking it serious, but also having that fun. I feel like also brings the bond closer as a team. Makes them play better as a team.
And of course, Brian Carrington, future position coach, has developed a pretty good group of corners. Keith Abney's development under his watch has been pretty remarkable to watch. What jumps out to you most about Coach Carrington?
Coach Carrington, I feel like him. It's him and Coach Dwayne Walker. I feel like they have styles that complement each other in coaching. Coach BC he's more on statistic wise. He pull up the stats, bringing up the numbers. Coach D Walk, he has the experience. I feel like that kind of complements each other coaching wise and helps develop players.
There's been a high number of Texans coming over the Texas Tempe pipeline. ASU historically has, really ventured into California for a lot of their players. Now, being from Georgia, what are some characteristics that a player from Georgia is going to bring to this program?
Uh, I don't mean I'm sorry, but I'm originally from Florida.
Okay.
So I originally, I still rep my hometown, but being in Georgia, playing in both states, I feel like it's a different kind of football down here in the South. I feel like we have that grit, we have that hunger down here that I feel like we can bring to the West Coast.
And ASU's had some really accomplished players from Florida recently. It's tight end Shimon Mateer was an all-conference player. Jeff Sims has been doing his thing. So, what are some of the characteristics that make up a Florida guy?
Honestly, I feel like that mentality, that dog mentality, I feel like we're born with it. It can't be taught. Like something about that hunger, something about that hunger, we play with it. We play with that passion, we play with a lot of passion. I feel like that shows in game, shows with our play.
And for any ASU fans who might not have caught you in action or seen your film, give our viewers and listeners a self scouting report. What kind of skill set are you bringing to this defense?
To the game, I'm very, I feel like I'm very smart when it comes to football. I have a high football IQ. I would say, I've been playing this game for a long time. I know the game. I've been playing DB since I started playing football, so I have a high IQ. Technique. I pride myself in my technique. I feel like my technique is up there with the best, and I feel like I'm always improving, and I always want to improve. I always want to find ways to get better.
As a ball hawking corner and a guy who really makes life difficult for opposing quarterbacks, is there one interception in your career that kind of stands out above that's your favorite?
Honestly, it was probably last year. I think it was second round of the playoffs. I say it's my favorite because we were playing Creekside. I think it's my favorite because early on in the game, like I had got scored on, so I knew I knew what type of game it was, and I knew my job and what I had to do. I wasn't satisfied, so I knew I had to come back, make up for it. So I think following drive, I had caught a pick. So I feel like that was real important to me because it was also against my former school. So
Mm.
it felt personal for me.
Are there any corners or other DBs at the pro or college levels that you maybe try to incorporate parts of their game into yours?
Oh, for sure. I got a few. Present, right?
Yeah, or anybody at all that has inspired you.
Honestly, I feel like top ones, like pass wise, my favorite is Darrell Reeves. I look up to him. That's a
Mm.
guy I grew up watching. My dad's a Jets fan, so I grew up watching him a lot. So I feel like he's helped me mold my game for sure. Him, Pat Surtain, Jalen Ramsey, Derek Stingley, AJ Terrell. Like those are top guys that I'm on my game after.
So of course you're playing for a defensive system and defensive scheme of Brian Ward, and obviously the Sun Devil defense has had a pretty good year under his watch. What kind of jumps out to you most about what kind of Brian Ward's scheme and how your skills fit in that scheme?
Honestly, I feel like I can adapt to different schemes. I feel like I can play in any scheme that's available to me. I just feel like uh, guys like Keith Avenue, they've been balling with this defensive scheme. Looking up to him, I can learn from him and build off that. Hopefully as well, start balling as well.
Of course, this is a big day for you, officially putting pen to paper and becoming a Sun Devil, but so many other Sun Devils in this 2026 class, a very talented group of future Sun Devils. What are your thoughts on just kind of the overall makeup of this 26 class?
Honestly, I really like this 26 class, and I feel like we all, I feel like we all are more on the underrated side, but I feel like we all play well. We gonna play well together. We all most of us, some of us, we all went on the OV together. So I feel like we already started building that bond on our OV. Guys like Jake, guys like Carday, guys like them, all guys all around the class. And I feel like we all already have a close bond. I feel like we gonna bring some good stuff to Arizona State.
Since making yourself a verbal commitment several months ago, you've been kind of vocal on social media about your enthusiasm for the program, the class. Is leadership kind of an innate part of your game and what you bring to the program?
I think so. To be honest, I think so. I feel like I have the good traits that could be a leader, but I also feel like I gotta earn that as well. So I also feel like I have stuff to do that I can earn that. I can't really just put that title on myself.
So about 8, 9 months from now, in Mountain America Stadium on game day, when you're running through Tillman Tunnel past that Pat Tillman statue in the maroon and gold, what's that going to mean to you in that moment to achieve that dream of beginning a college football career?
Honestly, it would mean everything, man. I've been thinking about this since I was little, but it also keeps that motivation going because I got a job to do. And I'm not trying to stop only here. I'm trying to keep going into the next level until I can't no more. So it always keeps that chip on my shoulder.
Ultimately, what excites you the most about being an Arizona State Sun Devil?
The environment, for sure. The environment. I can't TCU game. think that home game, stadium will be rocking. The atmosphere, the fans, it's great. It's amazing.
So, although the transfer portal doesn't officially open until January 2nd, players all across the country are making their future intentions known. And as of this recording, 5 Sun Devils have put their name out there, publicly confirmed that they will be doing so, plus one other elephant in the room that we will discuss here in a moment. And of course, ASU will be very active in the portal as they have been since Kenny Dillingham took over. It's obviously a crucial component of success for any program these days. But Joe, let's run down the 5 so far. The first one to make their intentions known was linebacker Tate Romney, who himself was a transfer portal addition from BYU, a starter in 23, just kind of a solid contributor. Battled some injuries over the last couple of years as a rotational piece at the linebacker spot, but he'll be looking to play elsewhere for his final season.
Yeah, and that's a shame. Obviously, he's a local guy from Chandler, and he came back, and he was one of very few bright spots on that 2023 team. What he did out there was something admirable. But as ASU recruited in the transfer portal, you get guys like Jordan Crook, like Keyshawn Elliott, and someone like Caleb McCullough last year, just really having a great season as a senior. Just didn't really have a high-level role. And even going into next year with Keyshawn Elliott and Jordan Crook out of the lineup, you still bring back Martell Hughes again. Like that's like going to be my big breakout guy for next year. And you get Cyrus Fiaseu back because he's medically redshirting. So those are probably going to be your 2 starters there. So Romney, even again, with those 2 senior departures, still would have had a real uphill battle to crack the starting lineup, barring injury. And I'm sure ASU is going to, do some work at that position as well in the transfer portal. So, it makes sense if the guy wants to end his career, to be able to be a starter and play a lot. That opportunity is probably going to be elsewhere. So these are the types of transfers that you don't love to see, of course, but you can't fault them. You can't blame them because when playing time is on the line and you don't have much time to play college football, you got to make the best decision for yourself.
Absolutely, and I think that's one thing fans should come to grips with, because of course this is basically kind of free agency year in year out in college, and it is obviously an adjustment for everybody around and covering and a fan of this sport. But of course, with some of these guys that perhaps know that their time on the gridiron is coming to an end, one last little payday somewhere and getting their value, or even of course, as we've seen before, just because you're entering the portal doesn't mean you can't take your name out and return. So these are all coming in, the very early stages, of course, weeks out from the actual portal opening. But yeah, was a solid contributor. But yeah, with just how they've been recruiting and bringing in talent in that position, it just made a lot of sense for him to find greener pastures. And that kind of goes for our next guy, the second guy to announce his intentions, offensive lineman Joey Sua, who was a one-time Arkansas transfer. Now, as we'll talk about a little bit later, he's still out there practicing with the team in the bowl prep. It's something that Kenny Dillingham welcomes. And he's also just really handling this with a lot of grace. But Sua is a guy that was not able to really kind of crack that rotation in terms of the interior offensive line. And he's got a big frame, a tremendous story of all the things, the medical challenges as a child he was able to overcome, kind of against all odds, and just make it to this level is remarkable enough. But hopefully he'll find a great place to make an impact in the future.
Yeah, he was a really intriguing transfer. He was a decently rated recruit. You see the size, and that jumps off the page to you. But all the sentiments that we said about Tate Romney can be said kind of double for him, because Romney got a fair amount of playing time, especially in his first year. Sue just never really able to crack the lineup. So again, that's one where we can have a chance to find some playing time. Just doesn't appear to be the case at Arizona State. So that's a very much a no hard feelings situation.
One guy who did get a lot of playing time at Arizona State is jumping into the portal, and that's starting left tackle Josh Atkins, who is a redshirt senior. But and that's kind of one of the things some folks saw right away. How does he still have another year? Well, during his initial time at Houston, he of course had a redshirt year and then was injured 1 year, so he did get a 6th year, and he's looking to play his ball elsewhere. As we touched on last week and a little bit earlier, ASU did pick up a huge left tackle commit in Jermaine Marshall from the junior college level of the Georgia commit. So perhaps that softens the blow, or in as ASU's apparent left tackle in 2026. But Atkins is a guy that had some highs, had some lows. during his time. Some struggles in pass pro. Really a good part is as a run blocker as well. I think I've said many times on the show, I feel like he's probably best cast as on the interior of an offensive line rather than out there as a left tackle. But a good team leader, one of the team captains, a guy who's really helping, one of those leadership voices in the offensive line room. But again, he'll be playing his ball elsewhere in 26.
Yeah, I mean, the initial reaction when you see your 2-year starting left tackle, enter the transfer portal is to be highly concerned. But as you mentioned, I mean, ASU acquired, well, at least on paper, it looks like a really intriguing recruit that can play that position. Again, Atkins was a decent player. Obviously, he occupied a lot of space there and started many games. That said, as you mentioned, there were some low points. Not someone that was really on the all-conference caliber lists that we just kind of read off either this year or last, to my knowledge. So someone, again, a decent player out there, someone that is probably going to find a good landing spot because left tackles, experienced ones, are pretty difficult to find. So there's probably, he's probably going to have some suitors out there. But with what ASU did in junior college recruiting there, you'd have to imagine that they feel pretty good about to where they might end up at the position.
Of course, in addition to Mitchell, they have Jalen Clem headlining a group of other, at least slated to return offensive linemen in that room as well. So that'll be interesting to see. There's going to be some significant changes along the Sun Devil offensive line, regardless, and so this will be one of those as well. The fourth player to announce their intent, tight end Jayden Fortier, a former 4-star prospect, really has been, I believe, he tore his ACL before. Coming down here to Tempe, made his way back, just continued to battle the injury bug all throughout this season as well. Still has his 4 years of eligibility, as a matter of fact. But even with Shimon Mateer moving on after this season, ASU's tight end room, you have AJ Ia coming in as a redshirt freshman, the talented Kamari Anderson. You're bringing in Landon Myrie and Hayden Vercher through the 2026 signing class. So Jason Mons still has a pretty deep room. So perhaps just a fresh start would be in Fortier's best interest.
Yeah, really unfortunate just how the story's been written for him at the college level. I mean, he got hurt in the state championship game, if I'm not mistaken, or at least very late in his high school career. And he was, if you remember his recruitment, he was really on the ascent. He was a pretty big name, especially in the late stages of things. So that was a big get for ASU. But that injury, they just couldn't really shake that. I mean, he's someone that unfortunately just saw him standing on the sidelines every single week, which is an unfortunate thing. So hopefully he can get healthy. As you mentioned, with what Jason Mons has done, he's someone that's very credible in terms of recruiting. You have a lot of faith and trust in what he can do at that position. You mentioned ASU's got a couple returners. They got a couple signees. Doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to hit the transfer portal as well. They can probably sell that position to someone of decent credibility. So again, this is one of those ones that the stuff happens in college sports where you got a guy that, these recruits, these signing day recruits we're talking about right now, you go back in time a couple years ago, and he was one that we were probably saying, hey, 2 years from now, he could be the guy. You gotta watch out for him in a couple of years. And sadly, due to health issues, it just didn't materialize here. Not to say that it cannot elsewhere, but a fresh start just seems to be in the cards for him.
And the fifth and final player to officially and confirmed have their intentions to enter the portal known. This one is a bit of a surprise. Cornerback Javan Robinson, a 2-year starter, the partner in crime for Keith Abney. I thought he had a solid, unspectacular 2025 season. Of course, everybody remembers his clutch interception against BYU to seal that victory in 2024. But this is a guy that's with Abney having the star-making season that he did, saw a lot of balls thrown his way, especially in that U of A game. They were definitely targeting him early and often in that game. But he's a 2-year starter. Came down from Wazoo. I was familiar with the Brian Ward system, and it looks like that he'll at least gauge the waters out there, see what's out there, and see if there's a better fit for him.
Yeah, he was someone that was a real solid player in 2024. Felt like his play regressed quite a bit this year. You saw like Rodney Bimage get into the action more before that real scary injury that he suffered late in the season. So I feel like it was a step backward for Robinson in this. Now then, kind of similar to what we're talking about with Atkins. You got a multi-year starter, at a position where teams typically need guys. So it's going to be real interesting to see where these players land. Assume they go elsewhere again. It's the caveats there. The possibility of return is certainly on the table, I'm sure. But yeah, he was someone that I had a bit of a forgettable season, I would say. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was the one that was just completely burned at the end of the Mississippi State game on that game-winning touchdown. So, again, someone that gave this program some great memories and saved the season in 2024 with that interception against BYU. So, some good memories there. But ASU is going to be charged now, really, with replacing, in theory, if you figure Keith Abney is going to go to the NFL, they very likely or presumably will be in a situation to replace both their typical starting cornerbacks.
Yeah, a couple of young guys, and Rodney Bimage and Joseph Smith are, at least have the leaders in the clubhouse to assume those starting roles. But man, when you have some very veteran corners like Abney and Robinson, that's certainly a luxury to have, and that's something that ASU in 26, at least at this point, does not have. So we'll see what they do in the transfer portal. But as you mentioned, some good memories there with Robinson, and some a key part of was overall a very good Sun Devil defense. Now, Joe, the elephant in the room. There has not been an official announcement from player, agent, team at this point, but every and all sign point to quarterback Sam Leavitt jumping into the portal, exploring his options, and that included a quote tweet by Kenny Dilling himself earlier today. Of course, saying great guy, won a conference title. Whoever gets him, he's going to have a great future. And he has been on record as being very, very complimentary and speaking so highly of Sam Leavitt. Now, one of the things that has kind of come out is that the team held its banquet on Sunday, and he was a no-show, was not in attendance. So the only team captain for that to be the case. Even guys that have jumped in the portal, Joey Sua was tweeting pictures with him and Sparky at that event. And of course, a few weeks ago, the initial report came out initially by On3 that it was, as they termed it, doubtful that he would return in 2026 to the Sun Devils. His agent, who happens to be his brother, disputed that report initially. There's been all kinds of signs here and there. He then ultimately did show up at practice for a few sessions, was at the U of A game in attendance on the scooters. Of course, he is recovering from the foot injury, but it's complicated because I think there's some nuance there. There's he's came to ASU as a young backup quarterback, one starting job, ultimately helped win a conference championship, had some good moments in 2025 as he was dealing with a ton of hype, ultimately fell a little bit short, battled some injuries, really kind of for the most part of the season when he was out there, wasn't fully healthy. But now it seems like that his Sun Devil career is going to be behind him. And I think that leaves a complicated legacy, and a complicated legacy that didn't have to be there, kind of given how recent events are playing out.
Yeah. So, first things first, here we are Tuesday evening recording. As of right now, he has not entered the transfer portal yet, but he has not entered it. So, I'm kind of a believer to an extent of until something happens, it hasn't happened. Now, that's not to deny that it seems incredibly likely and as close to a guarantee as you can get without being a guarantee that it's going to happen. But, we'll probably dive way deeper into it if things do materialize, not only entering the portal, but choosing another school, because that'll obviously be the finality of basically him ending his career as a Sun Devil. I do have to say, the topic of the team banquet, because by all accounts, it does not sound like there was a legitimate reason for him not to be there. Medical setback, family emergency, etc. It is my opinion that his choice not to attend the banquet is absolutely pathetic, juvenile and childish, and definitively selfish to not attend that banquet. That is something that I don't think it'll factor in much, but I wonder if a coach that recruits him out of the transfer portal, should he enter, is going to ask him about that. Because to me, that is a terrible example of leadership. Your starting quarterback needs to do much better than that. As you mentioned, his legacy, it's tough because, when players transfer away that aren't doing, like we talked about Joey Sua, like we talked about Tate Romney, looking for, the opportunity to play. When a key player transfers away, for me personally, it's tough to remember them in a truly positive light because there's that missing piece. They chose to leave. And this is a guy that's being handsomely compensated. It's generally public information, or at least available on the internet. This dude reportedly making in excess of 7 figures as an NIL compensation package. That's not me making something up or saying something that's not already out there. So it's not as though there's just nothing being given there. So as you mentioned, it's very complicated. I'm going to reserve, the depth of my view and opinions on the matter in full until something happens, because again, until it happens, it hasn't happened. Regardless, I still am ashamed of him for not attending the banquet. So that's something that I feel like ASU put Sam Leavitt in a great position. Sam Leavitt helped put ASU in a great position, but ASU put Sam Leavitt in a great position. Sam Leavitt owes a lot to Arizona State University and Sun Devil football. And so to me, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm not. But I look at that as a slap in the face to everyone who supported Sam Leavitt. The coaches, the teammates, the administrators, and especially the fans. So that kind of thing, man, that's basically the equivalent to just putting your middle finger in the air as you hit the gas and the exhaust fumes, hit the person that you're peeling out rubber to get away from. So to me, man, it may be in the eyes of some just a small, insignificant thing, but to me, as a captain, the only captain who didn't choose to show for that, it's embarrassing and it's pathetic.
Yeah, as we said, it's not official. The portal opens in January. He has not made any public declarations like the other players that we've discussed. And usually you'll see, the graphic and all the, the thanks to all the coaches and all the stuff recounting the journey. We haven't seen any of that from Sam. So it is a bit complicated, but as we talked about, the signs are there, and we'll see exactly how it plays out. There's already some fatalist ASU fans thinking that he's going to go to LSU, win a Heisman, and just like lightning is going to strike twice in that fashion again, which he might. He's a very good player, and he's going to be a guy in demand despite the injury likely keeping him out of spring practice at his whatever destination he's at. But I do think when you look at perhaps if this is in fact heading towards a divorce or a separation, that you look at how this is being handled by him and his team versus a guy like Joey Sua, who, despite not being, a star yet in the college game, during the holiday weekend, still worked with folks to gather toys for a donation and give them back to here in the Valley, local organizations and help children have a great holiday season, doing stuff for a place that he's about to leave, that intends to leave. That a guy who is out there at practice right now, knowing that, he's doesn't have to be. He could get hurt, and that might hurt his stock. But he wants to finish the season out with his brothers from this 2025 team. And it's it doesn't hurt to be nice at all. I think Kenny's said that. It's just also one of the simple facts of life. And there's ways to handle things with grace and professionalism. And some folks decide not to do that. Some folks do. And I'm never really going to begrudge a player for trying to get their value, and if they can get how many among us would not maybe go somewhere else if someone says, hey, I'm going to double your pay? That's great. But there's also right and wrong ways to do that. And again, this is kind of like a story still being written. We have no idea how this will play out, but there are tea leaves, and we have been doing some reading, and it's just ultimately kind of unfortunate if that is the case, because he could have been a guy that never bought another meal in the state of Arizona for the rest of his life. And now if things progress as it is, that legacy becomes far more complicated.
And it just makes guys like Cam Scattaboo, Jordan Tyson, in all likelihood, just mean so much more to this program. We've said it multiple times on this show that there are right and wrong, good and bad ways to transfer. And it's not about holding something against it being sour about a kid because he's going to leave a particular program. I mean, the transfer portal hasn't even formally opened yet, right? Is that correct?
January 2nd.
So there was no need to take any actions that are involved in this topic. You know what I'm saying? It's not like the transfer portal opened the day of the banquet or something like that. I know I'm really hinging on that event, but there's basically he could have done that, and he could have been around at some of these practices, and he could have supported his team through bowl game preparation and done those sort of things. And at least if he's going to go out on a positive and a high note, and have it be an amicable split, at least in the eyes of the fans, because man, this is something that it's tough. It's tough because I know that legacy is not really a priority for a lot of athletes. Finishing what you started, not a priority for a lot of athletes. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing. I get that it's a business, and I get that it's sports. And so it doesn't necessarily always have to have those touchy-feely sort of things. It's just unfortunate because it feels like though this season has been good, it's not been great, but it's been good. I think in a lot of respects, their ASU fans probably feel like they're just like taking punch after punch after punch, between the injuries, between losing territorial cut, between this sort of topic. Fans, I'm sure, just probably not terribly pleased with what's going on right here and right now. So, again, it is a difficult thing because it almost gives you like an asterisk of, man, that unforgettable season where ASU marched onto the college football playoff and won its first conference title in nearly 30 years. Who's the quarterback? Oh, yeah, it's that guy that stayed around for a year, So, again, very complex, very complicated, not yet official. More to be said if and when things materialize, both number one, entering the transfer portal, number two, again, choosing a different school. But again, pretty much all logic is telling you that's going to be the way it is. And then like a larger scale topic about it is, we can cut to the brass tacks. It's a money thing, and that's not a secret, right? It's got to be, at least as the primary motivator. So if you're ASU, even if you do have the means to maybe match some SEC offer or something like that, is that the smart thing to do? I believe we talked about this in on our show when this news was really first touched on from On3. Is it the smart thing to do to put all your eggs in the basket of a quarterback when you have to fortify numerous positions where that money can go to get you several guys? That is a logical thing. Again, we talked about that a handful of weeks ago, where at some point you just kind of got to tap out and say, we got to worry about a team, not just one player.
Yeah, and if there's one, this is a point that's been widely made. I think that most people follow the program. It occurred to him pretty quick is that if there's one position that you don't worry about Kenny Dillingham finding a quality option, it's quarterback. And I think what we've seen from Kenny over the course of his career, playing in Tempe is going to be pretty attractive for a lot of quarterbacks. We've already seen some of the early dominoes across the country fall. And the quarterback market's always been pretty wild in the transfer portal era. But, you've seen some guys, whether it's some guys maybe making that jump up from a lower level, like a Colton Joseph from Old Dominion. That's a name that's getting a lot of traction so far, or maybe some other more established guys at the Power 4 level, or perhaps, a guy like Sam Leavitt, who was kind of a little bit under the radar. It was a young kid at a power program, was looking for an opportunity. So whether it is a move for an established star or taking a chance on a younger guy that perhaps comes with a lower price tag, that all of a sudden I can get my quarterback and then maybe a couple of linemen or maybe some weapons for him as well. Because this is going to be a very different looking level team.
You're going to have to get the kicker.
Yeah,
so, kicker, center. Yeah, we'll get our portal wish list, I'm sure, in the future show. But yeah.
Oh, for sure. That the shopping list is pretty extensive, and there's not any position on the team that you don't think couldn't use some fortification or some reinforcements heading into 26. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But I do think that what we've seen from Kenny, what his reputation kind of sells the program itself, and of course ASU has some resources. They're well positioned, but obviously they're not on a tier like these big spenders in the SEC and the Big Ten. But we've heard Kenny say that the school and athletic director Graham Rossini have pledged to increase those resources as well to keep ASU more competitive. We've seen, Utah with the private equity deal announced earlier today, as well as the cookie money at BYU and the oil money at Texas Tech, and so it's an arms race. And unlike the previous AD, this current AD understands ASU needs to try to keep up with the Joneses in a way to stay competitive and keep this positive momentum. So we'll see how it all trickles out.
Yeah.
But Joe, it's going to be an interesting few weeks.
Yeah, and I think just it's putting the cart before the horse to talk about landing spots, because again, that's a couple steps away. But I know a lot of folks are LSU's come up, and there are some folks that are kind of concerned about like Texas Tech. But then there's also that question about, is Raiola gonna? I mean, he's got to go to Texas Tech. Doesn't Raiola have to go there because he has to follow the Patrick Mahomes like life plan? I know Ralph has had some fun with that. So, that's, again, conversation for another time. If it does become concrete that he's entering the portal and going to go elsewhere, as far as the schools that you just don't want him to see at, which would basically be the Big 12 for the most part now.
All right. So on a more positive note, let's cap the show with some conversations with some guys that came here via the portal for a couple of years and made their mark, made some positive plays and some good memories in the Maroon and Gold. We'll start things off with the conversation with the multiplier, defensive tackle, Jacob Kongaika. All right, so just one game left in the college career. Is that kind of set in yet, or are you kind of just like approaching it as just another game?
I mean, kind of a little bit, not too much. Gonna miss the guys like Keyshawn Elliott. Always bullying him here and there. But nah, just thinking about it is like trying to approach it as just another game in the week. Of the season. But try not to think too much about it.
Have you taken some time, just kind of with the little break here, that maybe to kind of take it all in and reflect upon, the career so far?
Yeah, last week we didn't really have practice. I had optional lifts, come in, get right, but just was able to sit back and enjoy, the place, how far I've come, what I have become, and it's just a blessing, man. When you look back at your couple of years here as a Sun Devil, what are some of the most kind of profound impacts that this time and experience has had on you? I mean, it's, I came in, I was a big goofball. I still am, but, I feel like I've grown enough to where, I'm able to be a leader to, some of the younger guys, and they really look up to me now, so I'm really honored to be able to step into that role. When the impact that you've had in that room, being that multiplier, have you seen that maybe in that kind of infectious energy that you bring, maybe spread to others, and maybe that once you're gone next season, that kind of multiplier legacy will continue? Yeah, I think everybody comes in with a little more energy than usual. I think just coming in, being grateful that we're here, just having a good time. Making the best of our time here. So yeah. Now, when you look at the body of work that this defense was able to put together, throughout the course of the year, what are you most proud of what this Sun Devil defense in 25 was able to do? Just being able to just stay together. Never point fingers, never blame each other. When something goes wrong, we never put each other down. We always keep each other up and stay together like a real brotherhood. Of course, the last game a little bit of a disappointment, but the defense played extremely well. What were some of the things that kind of jumped out about why you guys were able to kind of keep the team in the game, show that resiliency, despite the adversity, some of the bad field position that you guys were put into, but kind of always rising to the challenge? Just knowing that I got my brother next to me, it makes it easier for me to just go do my job, knowing that I'm doing it for someone other than myself, you know what I mean? So, it's just playing for my brother, it just makes me feel like I got to give my all, and I got to do all that I can in my job just to stop them, you know what I mean? What does it mean to you to get one more chance to suit up and play with your guys in El Paso? Oh, man, it means the world, man. We're going to have a time out there, We're just going to enjoy it, and we're going to play hard for each other, since it's the last one. What are any early thoughts on this potent Duke offense, coming off an ACC championship? Nah, not too much. I've been trying to focus on us, trying to help the younger guys get a little better, trying to make sure they're all filled in on everything they need to know, and just help them out with everything. And of course, a big focus of these early bowl practices are the, the younger guys, as your fans are over there are howling. Mentoring these younger guys, getting some extra work in these early practices. How do you see yourself kind of, being that elder statesman, passing on what you've learned? I just, guys like this, I try to push them every day. I'm not a player. I'm an interviewer. You know what I mean? And then, it's just really just trying to be that leadership role to help them as much as I can. So I have a question here from AJ. That's it?
So every Tuesday we used to go out to BJ's. What happened to that tradition?
We're still going out this Tuesday to go to Pazooki's tonight, since it is Tuesday.
Oh yeah, everybody meet and greet at 5. Meet Jacob at 5 o'clock.
And so with been a pretty impactful career during your couple years here in Tempe. You know, how do you hope Sun Devil fans remember you 5-10 years down the road?
Just a guy that, came out with a smile, always had a good time and just hit the person in front of him, just whooped them, that's it.
As season has come to an end and we prepare for the bowl game, how are you feeling? Emotions?
I'm feeling grateful just to be here, go to a bowl game. I played where we didn't go to a bowl game my freshman year, so, it's always a grateful experience to go somewhere with the guys, a new place, get played in a new area.
Has it set in that, it's kind of the last ride at the college level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, last one. It feels like it was just yesterday, 2021, I came in early freshman, so it felt good, to see how I progressed over the years.
How's the fishing rivalry with Harry gone so far this season?
Pretty good. I mean, we didn't really have time, so we've been working, but I'm finna get back to it.
As one of the, kind of the senior leaders on this team, how has it been kind of, especially with these early bowl practices, maybe, helping pass that torch and getting the younger guys like Harry ready for 26 and beyond?
I think Harry's going to be okay. Nah, but it feels good, though, to pass the torch. I mean, I remember when I was in their spot, I had guys that passed me the torch at Florida State. Keyshawn Helton, one of the guys I looked up to since I was young, just watching Florida State, watching him grow, grind, Pokey Wilson, AP, those guys all were 23, 24 years old. I'm 18, coming in, just learning from them, seeing what I can do from them, and they teaching me how to be a leader, how to be a man, how to grow up in this environment.
Last time out, rough go for the offense. How do you guys kind of maybe take some lessons from that effort to, kind of end on a good note against Duke?
Yeah, we got one more, another game, last game's over, next rep, one play mentality.
When you look ahead to the matchup against Duke, what kind of jumps out to you about this Blue Devil defense?
They're very active. They got a great head coach. He was my defensive coach at Penn State, and he's a great coach. I've known him for a long time. So, they're going to be ready. They're going to be ready for whatever you do. They got a week to prepare, so they're going to come out and be ready.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guests, Jalen Williams, Jacob Kongaika, and Malik McClain. As we mentioned, the Sun Bowl is coming up, but it is a couple weeks away, so we got some time. That'll be kicking off at noon on New Year's Eve. TV here on CBS 5. Make sure you tune in. And also make sure you stay with us on the social media side of things. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devil, subscribe on YouTube and on Facebook, and give me a follow on all things social media at BDenny29.
And you can follow me at Joe Healy42. A huge shout out, of course, to our awesome sponsors, Burrito Express, Cactus Sports, DevilsDigest.com, Jones Auto Group, Nice Pest Company, Sun Devil Family Charities, and More Lending, PJ Saturno, NMLS number 257912, More Lending LLC branch in MLS number 2732146.
And once you're done supporting all of our amazing sponsors, make sure to follow or to give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week to follow the Sun Devils' preparation for El Paso and catch the latest episode of As the Transfer Portal Turns.